Hi, guys. So just to be clear, this talk is not a huge technical talk. I am a product manager at Red Hat, and I can play an engineer on TV, but I wouldn't want to insult some of my engineering colleagues by claiming that I'm an engineer. But this is also not a one-on-one talk, right? This is a talk about how to get something to be a product. And a product or a solution it has a few characteristics. And one of them is that it has to be documented. It has to be installable. It has to be upgradable. It has to be have multiple use cases that it serves, not just a single use case. So for operational management, and specifically the monitoring part of operational management, I'm trying to define something that I suggest the OpenStack community take up to build an operation monitoring solution, right? So in the 10 minutes we have, I'll go through quickly why I see the need, what's the current state, what requirements are driving this, and what the solution is, right? And then from there, we can go and see if that's a valid solution or that's something the community can take up. All right. First thing is operational management is hard. As proof, I offer the fact that a number of companies are now offering managed services that used to offer distributions before. I used to be in one of those companies. But Red Hat is very committed, for example, to doing distribution. So building a product that meets these customer operation needs is very hard. It's not, and the reasons for that will become apparent. So what are we looking at? So deployment has had tons and tons of focus because there was everybody said deployment is a competitive advantage. Then we've sort of come towards containers, Kubernetes. There's been so much focus on it. I believe the community is well represented there, and I'm not going to focus on that. Updates and upgrades are sort of getting to that stage. All customers ask for those. We want to do updates for our current installation and then upgrade to a new version of OpenStack. When it comes, all of that is lots of focus. Monitoring is, unfortunately, not there yet. And what do I mean by monitoring? Performance monitoring, how is it doing? What's happening? Is something taking too much CPU? Is something taking too much storage? Is just something just blocking the network traffic? That's what is the false? Did something fail in this whole huge installation that's completely distributed, has multiple regions? Did something fail somewhere? And then you have to look at logs because something could happen over multiple days, multiple weeks, and you need to analyze that to do root cause analysis, for example. And then how do you see all of this? You need the dashboards. So that's the kind of thing that I'm focusing on when I talk about monitoring. So the solution I'm looking at is not component focused. It just isn't about just telemetry, or it's not just about logging, or it's not about Elasticsearch. It's about cloud infrastructure as an overall use case, right? How do you get alarms that result in the right support? How does one do root cause analysis? Notice I didn't mention any components here, right? It's not an OpenStack specific component at all. It's a customer use case that goes across all the infrastructure. So the solution then, I alluded to this before, it should packaging, configuration, integration, and of the tools themselves and OpenStack infrastructure should be out of the box, right? It shouldn't be so hard that everything is a snowflake. And for those of you who are not Americans, a snowflake is not a term of endearment anymore. It's not, So everything which that means is not everything shouldn't be unique and custom. So what are the kind of requirements that are driving it? Paradoxically, customer requirements are actually opposing. They say, we have done operations in data centers forever and ever, and we have our own operational tools. We know how to do this. Don't tell us and be totally opinionated about what tools I should use and how I should use them. And the paradox is then they are like, oh, why don't you tell us what to monitor in OpenStack, right? So because they are new to cloud, right? New to how cloud really works. New to how OpenStack really works. So there's a sort of tension between those things. The other thing they have is because they have these sets of operational tools, the tools are like, oh, I'm actually going to go down to the operating system and get information. Others are like, I don't care about that. It needs to be aggregated somewhere, and I need to just grab from where that is. So they have needs at multiple levels. And they need flexibility from whatever platform you have. So the official word on monitoring, by the way, and this is taken from the wiki, OpenStack wiki. It's not my words, so don't shoot the messenger. Operators are generally unhappy with monitoring OpenStack in general, I guess. That's from the website. So there are too many tools. There are too many places in OpenStack that require monitoring. It's not clear how and what to monitor. The amount of monitoring will have a performance impact on the whole cloud. How do you learn information about a host service? And this comes from a list which says issues with monitoring in OpenStack that is current in the wiki. Right? Now the wiki might, the documentation might not be up to date for a couple of versions, but I think that still holds. So OpenStack monitoring today, I'm just going to give you a snapshot. When I hit OpenStack operations in Google, this is what came up, right? OpenStack Pike administrator guides, telemetry, key management, So now you can see why customers are not happy, because it's like, wait a minute, I want to monitor the whole cloud, and you're giving me these small, not these small, these big telemetry guides and these admin guides that now have to figure out how to use them, right? So what are they doing today for monitoring the 3 types of monitoring that I talked about? So this is something, these are sort of best practices. This is for logging. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that these are the right things to do, just something that customers are doing, right? So they're using Fluentd, for example, which is an open source logging product on the nodes. And they aggregate that data on Elasticsearch, and they use Kibana to use as a dashboard for evaluating logging. Now, for availability monitoring, the top solution is Sensu, which is another open source project. They have agents on each of the nodes. They put it into a RabbitMQ to Sensu server, which then is read by Uchiva, which is another visualization product, right? Performance, CollectD, same thing. Carbon Relay, it could be anything, but Carbon Relay, Carbon Cache, WhisperDB is the collection point, and then Grafana is the visualization. So, what does this show us? They're all well-regarded open source projects. Nobody says that Kibana or Fluentd or CollectD are not open source projects and that they don't have a huge following and that they don't work at scale, right? But they're not OpenStack projects. Right? So there are a few more alternatives for each of these things. You could use for CollectD Noki instead of Carbon for metrics collection, right? So as you see, every customer will have a preference for the projects that they use. So what do we do to make a product? How do we provide a consistent framework for operations tools? So my suggestion is that there be 2 things, and I think they will address all the issues. One, we need a directory of monitoring checks in a deployed environment. So here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's a static thing. It's a directory that after the deployment tells you what to monitor, right? And basically, it's very simple. And if John Apple is here, he's the guy who gave me that idea. Yeah, I'm sorry. And I'm sure he's happy that I'm using it, but I wanted to give him some credit for it. You need to know what services are monitored, what the monitoring check procedure is, and some optional parameters like this is this is average, this is high, this is bad, this is good. You need that directory. Now imagine you could feed this directory with a machine learning system, right? You could do that, maybe with Traj, you just could feed it and make this directory so that for every deployment, there is a central directory that you can look at to see what needs to be monitored, right? And then you need frameworks and APIs for multiple levels of integration with monitoring components. And I'm going to suggest that. Let me see what the time is like. We have a minute, so I'm going to speed up. We need a metadata directory, which I talked about. You have ops metadata, service description, health check commands, success condition, failure condition. And then we need a 3-level framework and APIs. And I call them the synthesizer, collector, and sensor APIs. So I'll just quickly go through what does that mean. For example, a synthesizer could be CloudForms, which has a dashboard, which talks either to the collector, like Noki, or which it does today, by the way, or it can talk directly to the sensors for CollectD for performance monitoring. The next picture is a similar one. The synthesizer could be Kibana. You could either talk to a collector like Elasticsearch, or you could directly talk to the sensors that Fluentd is providing. And this is just to show you if we use CollectD in that use case that I talked about before, the sensors would be on this side, these would be the collectors, and these would be the synthesizers. So what are the advantages? For each deployment, what is being monitored can be accessed from a directory at the level that the user desired. Now you can take a bunch of service primitives, and through Heat and other orchestration, you can make high-level primitives high-level service descriptions from that. Monitoring components can now be treated as plugins rather than as, we got to directly integrate with it. There'll be a uniform interface for monitoring, and user tools can either use intermediate tools like time series databases or go directly to the source. So now operational tools can now be deployed as a role, and with the sort of all the advantages that you have today with deployment and upgrade tools that OpenStack has been working on. So that's my suggestion. Questions, I'll be in the back. If you have any questions, please come meet and talk to me. Thank you very much.